I saw them murder him, and they looked right through me like I wasn't even there. The kind of murder that doesn't make the news because the building is expensive, the men are richer than the law, and the witness is a black maid with bleach on her hands and a daughter to protect. The elevator doors shouldn't have opened on the penthouse level that night. I'd pressed basement B for laundry, B for invisible, B for where people like me belong. But something hijacked the ride. An executive override, the kind only management and penthouse access had, and those polished steel doors slid open on the 42nd floor instead, revealing a world I was never supposed to see. Like someone upstairs wanted the doors to open, like the building itself had been told to hand me over. Not the top of the tower, just the top of the world that mattered. The residents called the 40s the penthouse levels, even when the letters still ran A through D. My uniform still reeked of ammonia and lemon polish. 14 hours into my shift, and my feet had gone numb somewhere around hour 9. That's the trick they don't tell you about being a maid in Manhattan's most exclusive residential tower. You stop feeling your body after a while. Your hands move on autopilot, wiping down marble countertops that cost more than your yearly salary. Your eyes learn to focus on baseboards and crown molding, never on the people who own them. You become furniture, breathing wallpaper, a brown-skinned ghost in a gray polyester uniform. I'd perfected the art of smallness, shoulders curved inward, eyes downcast. Each movement calculated to take up less space, make less noise, leave less impression. In 5 years of working at the Grantham, I'd cleaned penthouses where movie stars slept, where hedge fund managers made phone calls that moved millions, where socialites snorted cocaine off books they'd never read. I'd seen it all, and I'd seen nothing. That was the job. That was survival. The elevator lurched, and I grabbed the handrail, my reflection catching in the mirrors that lined every wall. Dark circles under darker eyes, hair pulled back so tight it gave me headaches. 43 years old, looking 53, feeling 73. My daughter's face flashed through my mind. Keisha, 17, honors student. Scholarship applications scattered across our kitchen table in the Bronx. Everything I did, every ache I ignored, every humiliation I swallowed, it was for her. The doors opened. 3 men in the hallway. Expensive suits, faces I'd seen in the building directory. Mr. Whitmore from 42C Tech Money, early 30s, always polite in that distant way that rich people perfect. Another man I didn't recognize, older, silver-haired, with hands shaking so violently he could barely hold the small black device he was clutching. And Marcus Chen, the building's real estate attorney, whose apartment I'd cleaned just that morning. He wasn't family to any of them. He was the kind of lawyer rich men rented when they needed problems to disappear. The silver-haired man was crying. "Please," he whispered, "I can get you the money. I just need time. My wife, she doesn't know. If she finds out, Mr." Whitmore's voice cut through the hallway, sharp and cold as January whined off the Hudson. You had time. 18 months of time. I stood frozen in that elevator, my finger hovering over the door close button. Press it now. Disappear back into the machinery, into the basement, into invisibility where you're safe. But my body wouldn't move, because I'd trained myself for years to stay still when rich people were angry. Still meant safe, still meant unnoticed. And that night, still was the first mistake I made. The silver-haired man fell to his knees. "I'm begging you, Mr." Whitmore pulled something from his jacket. In the hallway's recessed lighting, the gun looked almost elegant, compact, matte black, probably worth more than my car. Our eyes met. He saw me, actually saw me. Not through me, not past me, but me, the woman in the gray uniform, whose name he'd never learned, whose presence he'd never acknowledged in 5 years of passing each other in lobbies and elevators. And then he smiled. Not relief, not triumph. Recognition, like he'd just decided what to do with the witness in the elevator. That's when I knew being invisible wasn't going to save me anymore. The gunshot echoed like thunder in a marble cathedral. I didn't see the silver-haired man fall. My eyes were still locked with Whitmore's. watching that smile spread across his face like spilled wine on white linen. Then Marcus Chen moved, blocking my view, but I heard the sound after the heavy, final thud of a body that wasn't getting back up, and the elevator doors finally obeyed my frantic fingers, sliding shut with a whisper that felt obscene after all that violence. My legs gave out. I collapsed against the mirrored wall, my reflection multiplying into infinity, 1,000 terrified women in gray uniforms, all of us guilty of the same crime. We witnessed. The elevator descended, and my mind raced faster. They saw me, and the worst part? I couldn't tell which danger was bigger, the men upstairs who just cleaned up a problem, or the unseen men downstairs who were about to start hunting for someone else. They know I work here. They know where to find me. The building kept employee records, addresses, emergency contacts, social security numbers. Keisha's name was on my paperwork, her school, her photograph on my locker in the staff room, basement level. The doors opened onto the service corridor, fluorescent lights humming their industrial lullaby. I stumbled out, my cleaning cart forgotten upstairs, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't grip my phone. Call the police. That's what normal people do. That's what people who don't live in my world do. But I'd watched enough true crime documentaries during my lunch breaks. I knew how these stories ended for women like me. Black Maid accuses white millionaire of murder. The building's lawyers would bury me before I finished giving my statement. The Grantham had cameras everywhere except the angles they claimed were malfunctioning whenever money was involved. And every employee signed a stack of paperwork that basically said, if the building says you're lying, you're disposable. I'd be the one arrested for theft, for trespassing, for drugs they'd plant in my locker. They'd paint me as unstable, desperate, delusional, and they'd be right about the desperate part. I headed toward the loading dock, toward the exit, toward anywhere that wasn't this building. My footsteps echoed off concrete walls, and that's when I heard it, a wet, ragged breathing, coming from behind the industrial laundry machines. Every instinct screamed run, but my feet, those numb, aching feet that had carried me through 14-hour shifts, moved toward the sound instead. He was wedged between the wall and a commercial dryer, one hand pressed against his abdomen, where blood seeped between his fingers. Asian features, maybe late 30s, expensive watch glinting under the harsh lights. His eyes found mine black as midnight, sharp despite the pain etching lines around them. Those eyes calculated, measured, decided something about me in half a heartbeat, not whether I was kind, whether I was controllable. Don't, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. Don't scream. I wasn't going to scream. I'd forgotten how. More blood pooled beneath him, spreading across the concrete like a dark flower blooming in fast forward. The industrial bucket beside my knee was half full of dirty mop water. I grabbed it, dumped it, and pressed the empty bucket against his wound. Then I ripped a roll of industrial paper towels off the dispenser and shoved the wad under the bucket rim. Makeshift pressure dressing, makeshift silence. Hold this. Press hard. He obeyed without question, which told me everything. This wasn't a man used to taking orders. This was a man who recognized necessity when it had its hands covered in his blood. Who did this? The question left my mouth before I could stop it. His laugh was bitter, wet. You really want that answer? No, I didn't. But I also didn't want to find another body tonight. Didn't want that weight added to everything else I'd carry home. Footsteps overhead, multiple sets, moving with purpose. The hunters, searching for what they'd lost. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. They find me. They kill you too. You understand? I understood. God help me. I understood perfectly. 2 witnesses in one night was careless. 0 witnesses was clean. The footsteps grew louder. The service corridor had 3 exits and a dozen hiding places if you knew where to look. 5 years of mopping these floors, of finding quiet corners to eat my lunch, of learning which doors stayed unlocked and which cameras had blind spots. All of it became relevant in the span of 3 seconds. Can you walk? He nodded, teeth gritted, and I hauled him up with strength I didn't know I possessed. Adrenaline makes you superhuman. terror makes you stupid. I was operating on both. The laundry chute room was 15 feet away. Staff used it to send linens down from the upper floors, but the bottom chamber was large enough for a person if that person didn't mind landing on top of yesterday's dirty sheets. I'd hidden there once during a fire drill, too exhausted to walk down 42 flights of stairs. I shoved him toward it as voices echoed from the stairwell. Two men, maybe three, speaking in rapid Korean, not Whitmore's clipped Ivy League voice. This was different, rougher, disciplined, the kind of language that sounded like command. He stiffened at the sound, and I understood another piece of this puzzle. This wasn't random violence. This was organized, personal, ethnic. This was the kind of trouble that followed you across oceans. Now. He looked at the chute opening, then at me, something flickering behind those calculating eyes. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. He climbed in. I closed the metal door just as the stairwell entrance banged open. Three men emerged, suits too nice for basement work, eyes too cold for anything legal. The one in front had a scar running from his temple to his jaw, a white line that caught the fluorescent light. My body moved on autopilot, muscle memory from 1,000 interactions with building residents. I bent down, picked up my mop, started pushing dirty water across already clean floors. Invisible. Insignificant. Exactly what they expected to see. Scarface walked past me, like I was furniture. The other two fanned out, checking behind machines, opening storage closets. Professional. Thorough. Terrifying. You. Scarface's voice cut through the humidity. Woman, you see anyone come through here? I kept mopping, kept my eyes on the gray water swirling in patterns. Sir? Someone injured. Bleeding. You see him? My English got worse when I needed it to. Not because I couldn't speak, because I'd learned the hard way that sounding simple made dangerous men underestimate you. I clean. I just clean. No, see nothing. He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, expensive, cloying, the kind that costs more than my rent. You're lying. He leaned in like he expected my breath to confess for me. I looked up then, let him see my face. Let him see the exhaustion, the fear, the absolute ordinariness of a woman at the end of a double shift who just wanted to go home. Let him see exactly what he expected, someone beneath his concern. I no lie, sir. I clean only. Please. I have daughter. I need this job. The magic words. I need this job. Every wealthy person's favorite reminder of their own power. He studied me for another moment, then dismissed me with a wave. The three of them moved deeper into the corridor, toward the loading dock, toward escape routes that made more sense than a laundry chute. I waited, kept mopping, counted to 60, then 60 again. The door to the stairs closed. Silence settled like dust. I opened the laundry chute. He looked up at me from his nest of soiled sheets, blood still seeping through his fingers, and something passed between us. Not gratitude, that would come later, or maybe never. This was recognition. Understanding. The acknowledgement that we'd both just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Why? He asked. I didn't have an answer that made sense. Maybe because I'd already seen one man die tonight. Maybe because I was tired of being invisible. Maybe because some part of me, the part that hadn't been beaten down by 14-hour shifts and chemical burns, and men who looked through me, still believed in helping people who needed help. I don't know, I said finally, but you need to leave before they come back. He pulled himself out of the chute, wincing. I can't. Not yet. They're watching the exits. Of course they were. These men didn't leave loose ends, and I'd just become one. We stayed in the laundry room for 47 minutes. I know because I watched the industrial clock above the dryers, each minute ticking past like a small death. He sat on an overturned bucket, his hand still pressed against the wound, his breathing measured and controlled in a way that suggested either military training or a familiarity with getting hurt that no civilian should possess. What's your name? He asked, breaking the silence. Does it matter? It matters to me. I hesitated. Giving him my name felt like handing over ammunition. But We were already past the point of anonymity. Lorraine. Lorraine Baptiste. He nodded slowly, committing it to memory with an intensity that made my skin prickle. James Kim. Though most people call me something else. I didn't ask what. I didn't want to know. His phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. He pulled it out with his free hand, the screen lighting up his face in harsh blue-white. Whatever he read there changed his expression from pained to focused. He typed something with one thumb, quick and efficient. Your people? I asked. Yes. They coming for you? They're already here. The loading dock door opened with a metallic groan. I grabbed my mop like it was a weapon, which was absurd. What was I going to do? Clean them to death? But James just sat there, calm, waiting. 4 men entered. These weren't the hunters from before. These men moved differently, coordinated, efficient, lethal. They wore dark clothes that could have been security uniforms or tactical gear. The one in front was massive, shoulders that could block doorways, hands that looked capable of snapping necks. He saw James and his face transformed relief, anger, something like brotherhood, all mixed together. They spoke in rapid Korean, voices low and urgent. I caught the tone, if not the words. Where the hell have you been? We've been looking everywhere. You're bleeding all over the goddamn floor. Then, all 4 sets of eyes turned to me. The big one's hand moved to his waistband. James said something sharp, a command that stopped the motion mid-reach. More Korean, faster now, argumentative. James's voice cut through it all, final and absolute. They didn't like whatever he said, but they obeyed. Lorraine. James stood, and I noticed he moved easier now, like the pain had become background noise he'd learned to ignore. These are my brothers. They're going to make sure you get home safely. I can get myself home. No. His voice carried a certainty that made my protest feel childish. You can't. Not anymore. You helped me, which means they saw you help me. That makes you. He paused, searching for the right word. Complicated. Complicated. What a bloodless way to say marked for death. The big one stepped forward, pulled out a wallet fat with cash. He counted out bills, hundreds, so many hundreds, and held them out to me. For your trouble, for your silence. I stared at that money, more than I made in 3 months. Enough to catch up on rent, to buy Keisha that laptop she needed for school, to breathe for the first time in years. I didn't take it. I don't want your money. Confusion flickered across their faces. James studied me with new interest, like I'd just revealed myself to be more than furniture after all. Everyone wants money, the big one said. Not as payment for watching you bleed. I don't know where the words came from. Maybe from the part of me that was still reeling from watching a man get shot in a penthouse hallway. Maybe from the part that was tired of being bought and dismissed. I helped because that's what people should do. Help each other. James smiled then, and it wasn't the cold smile Whitmore had given me before pulling that trigger. This was something else surprised, possibly pleased, definitely dangerous. You're either very brave or very stupid, Lorraine Baptiste. Can't I be both? That made him laugh, a sound that seemed to hurt his wound but happened anyway. He said something to his brothers in Korean, and the dynamic in the room shifted. The money disappeared. The big one nodded at me, something approaching respect in his eyes. My name is Day, he said. And apparently, we owe you. James pulled a business card from his pocket, expensive cardstock, minimalist design, just a name and a number. He held it out to me. If you ever need anything at all, you call that number. I took the card because refusing seemed more dangerous than accepting. The paper felt heavy, weighted with implications I couldn't fully grasp. They left the way they came, James walking between his brothers, blood still staining his shirt but his spine straight. At the doorway, he turned back. You saved my life tonight. That's not something I forget. That's not something I leave unpaid. And before I could tell myself I didn't care, I heard the warning inside the promise. Men like him never meant money when they said payment. Then they were gone, And I was alone in a basement laundry room with a card in my pocket and blood on my hands and the terrible certainty that my life had just changed in ways I couldn't begin to comprehend. I cleaned up the blood. All of it. Every drop. Made it disappear like it had never happened. If only erasing consequences was that simple. They fired me 3 days later. Not a reaction. A plan that had been drafted the same night the gun went off upstairs. Mr. Patterson called me into his office, the building manager, with his fake sympathy and his real impatience. He didn't look at me when he spoke, just shuffled papers on his desk, like he was reading from a script someone else had written. We're restructuring the housekeeping department. Budget cuts. You understand. I understood perfectly. Budget cuts didn't explain why my locker had been searched, why security had started following me through the corridors, why the other maids suddenly found reasons to avoid me in the break room. I've worked here 5 years without a single complaint, and we appreciate your service. You'll receive 2 weeks severance. He finally looked up, and something in his eyes told me he knew more than he was saying. I'd advise you to cash that check quickly and move on. Some situations, it's better not to ask questions. Threat wrapped in termination. I took the envelope he offered and walked out of the Grantham for the last time, my uniform still reeking of industrial cleaner, my hands still remembering the warmth of another person's blood. The problem started small. A man in a dark sedan parked outside my building for 3 consecutive days. Wrong number calls that stayed silent when I answered. Keisha, coming home from school, saying a woman had asked her questions, innocent questions, about her mother, about where we lived, about our routines. I stopped sleeping. Every car that slowed near the bus stop felt like a threat. Every unfamiliar face in the bodega made my heart race. I'd spent 5 years perfecting invisibility, and now I was the most visible person in my own life. The worst part? I couldn't explain it to anyone. How do you tell your daughter that you saved a bleeding stranger and now everything's falling apart? How do you admit that helping someone might have been the stupidest thing you'd ever done? My landlord knocked on the door 2 weeks later. Luis, who'd always been reasonable about late payments, who'd fixed our leaking sink and never raised the rent more than $50 in 7 years, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Lorraine, I'm sorry. I have to ask you to leave. What? Luis, we've never missed rent. I've got money saved. It's not about money. He glanced down the hallway like someone might be listening. Some men came by, asked questions about you, offered me. They offered me a lot of money to cooperate. My blood ran cold. Cooperate with what? I don't know. I don't want to know. But I have a family, Lorraine. I have kids. And these men. He finally looked at me, and I saw fear that mirrored my own. These aren't people you say no to. I need you out by the end of the month. 30 days to find a new apartment in the Bronx, with no job and no references and a target on my back. I started packing that night. Keisha found me sorting through our belongings at 2 in the morning, boxing up our life into categories. Essential, expendable, evidence. Mama, what's happening? I looked at my daughter, 17 years old, scholarship applications still spread across the kitchen table, her whole future carefully planned and suddenly precarious. She had her father's eyes, the man who'd left us when she was 3, and my stubborn chin. She was smarter than both of us combined. We're moving, that's all. Where? I don't know yet. Because you lost your job? Because it's time for a change. She wasn't stupid. She'd noticed the strange calls, the man in the sedan, the way I'd stopped letting her walk home from school alone. She'd noticed everything, and she was kind enough not to push. Did you do something wrong? The question hung in the air between us. Had I? By every moral standard I'd been raised with, I'd done something right. I'd saved a life. But morality and consequence don't always align, and my daughter shouldn't have to pay for my choices. I helped someone who needed help. That's all. And someone's mad about it? Yes. She thought about that, then came and sat beside me on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Grandmother always said doing the right thing costs something. My mother had said a lot of things before cancer took her. Most of it was religious nonsense I'd stopped believing in after my 20th unanswered prayer. But she'd been right about that part. Sometimes it costs everything. I said. We packed in silence after that, and I tried not to think about James Kim's business card, still tucked in my wallet. I tried not to think about what anything at all might mean to a man who commanded the kind of loyalty I'd seen in that basement. I tried not to think about how easy it would be to call that number and ask for help. But pride is expensive, and I was running out of currency to pay for it. The eviction notice came the next day, official and legal and impossible to fight. Someone had filed complaints about noise violations, property damage, suspicious activity. All lies, all documented. All enough to void my lease immediately. Not a court eviction worse. A termination for cause that meant the building's lawyer could change the locks and dare me to fight it. I looked at the paper, at the signatures and stamps that made fiction into fact, and felt something break inside me. Not my will, I'd broken that a long time ago, under the weight of double shifts and chemical burns. This was something deeper. My belief that playing by the rules mattered. My faith that keeping your head down kept you safe. I'd been invisible for so long, I'd forgotten that shadows only exist when someone shines a light. Now I was lit up, exposed, and the people holding the flashlight wanted me gone. I pulled out my phone and stared at James Kim's number for a long time before putting it away again. Not yet. I could still handle this myself. I could still protect Keisha without getting deeper into whatever darkness had bled onto my basement floor. I was wrong, of course. But I wouldn't know that until it was too late. The phone rang at 3 in the morning, a number I didn't recognize, lighting up the darkness of the motel room where Keisha and I had been living for the past week. A place where the sheets smelled like cigarettes and desperation, where the locks were suggestions rather than promises. I let it ring. Wrong numbers at 3 a.m. were never actually wrong. It rang again. Keisha stirred on the other bed, and I grabbed the phone before it could wake her fully. I stepped into the bathroom, closed the door, and answered without speaking. Lorraine Baptiste, his voice. I'd heard it only once, but some sounds burrow into your memory and make homes there. How did you get this number? The same way I know you're at the Riverside Motel on 149th Street. A 2-star place with a fancy name and locks that sounded like they were begging to fail. The same way I know you've applied for 12 jobs in the past 10 days and been rejected from all of them. The same way I know your daughter's scholarship interview is next week, and you don't have money for the train fare. I felt violated and grateful in equal measure. He'd been watching, keeping track. The thought should have terrified me, but instead I felt something else, a sick relief that someone knew how badly everything had fallen apart. What do you want? To apologize. I almost laughed. You're 3 weeks late for that. I know. A pause, and I heard street noise in the background. Cars, voices, the urban symphony of a city that never slept. I didn't realize they'd come after you. I should have. I should have protected you better. You didn't ask me to help you. No, but you did anyway. And that made you part of this, whether either of us wanted it or not. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, exhausted beyond words. Part of what? Exactly. What am I caught up in, James? Something that started long before that night. Something that won't end just because you pretend it didn't happen. His voice carried an edge now. Not quite threat, but close. The men who were hunting me? They belong to a group called the Jade Circle. They control most of the underground operations in Manhattan. Drugs, gambling, protection. They don't forgive debts. And they don't forget witnesses. I didn't witness anything. You saved me. That's worse than witnessing. That makes you opposition. The word hung heavy. Opposition. As if I had any power at all in this equation. So, what am I supposed to do? Keep running? Change my name? Disappear? You could. It wouldn't help. They're patient. They'd find you eventually. Another pause. Or you could let me fix this. There it was. The offer I'd known was coming since the moment I'd taken his business card. The deal that would cost me more than money. Fix it how? By making it clear that you're under my protection. That touching you means going through me. And why would they care about that? He laughed, low and humorless. Because I'm not some bleeding man in a basement anymore, Lorraine. I'm someone they can't afford to provoke. Not without consequences they're not ready to face. Who are you? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Someone who pays his debts. Someone who keeps his promises. Someone who doesn't let innocent women and their daughters suffer because they showed compassion. His tone shifted, became almost gentle. Someone who's offering you a way out of that motel room. I looked at the door separating me from Keisha, at the thin wood and cheaper lock that stood between her and a world that had suddenly become hostile. What would it cost me? Nothing immediate, nothing you'd notice, just acceptance that we're connected now. That what happened that night created an obligation between us. An obligation. Yes. Sounds like another word for debt. Debt implies I'm going to collect. I'm not. He sighed. And for the first time, he sounded tired. I'm trying to protect you from the consequences of protecting me. That's all. But it wasn't all. I could hear the unspoken conditions, the invisible strings that would tie me to whatever world he inhabited. No payment was ever really free. No protection came without its own price. I need to think about it. Of course. But Lorraine? His voice hardened just slightly. Think quickly. The Jade Circle doesn't operate on your timeline. They've already demonstrated patience. When they decide they're done waiting, you won't get a warning. The line went dead. I sat in that bathroom for another hour, listening to Keisha breathe in the next room, thinking about choices and consequences and the way one moment of compassion could rewrite your entire life. By morning, I'd made my decision. But I didn't call him back. Not yet. Because some part of me, the stubborn, foolish part that had gotten me into this mess, still believed I could handle it myself. That part would learn better, just not before things got worse. 3 years passed, like water through cupped hands, present, then gone, leaving only residue. I never called James Kim back. Instead, I did what I'd always done, survived. We moved to Newark, where rent was cheaper and questions were fewer. I worked under the table cleaning houses for cash. No references required. No questions asked. Keisha went to college on that scholarship. Brilliant and determined and unknowing about how close we'd come to losing everything. I became invisible again. Different city, different name on the lease, different routes and routines. I dyed my hair, lost weight from stress rather than intention, learned to check reflections in windows for familiar faces. The Jade Circle never came, and that should have been my first clue. In my world, silence wasn't mercy. Silence was someone taking their time. Maybe they'd forgotten. Maybe James had intervened without telling me. Maybe I'd simply managed to slip beneath their notice in the chaos of their criminal enterprise. I told myself it was over. I was wrong. While I shrank my world down to survival, James Kim expanded his into something else entirely. I learned about it the way everyone did, through whispers, through news reports that never quite named him, through the mythology that grows around certain kinds of men. He'd started in underground fighting, bare-knuckle matches in warehouses, the kind of violence people paid thousands to witness. He was undefeated, brutal, efficient, intelligent in the way he dismantled opponents. The money from those fights bought him leverage. Leverage bought him territory. Territory bought him fear. Within 2 years, he controlled 3 neighborhoods in Lower Manhattan. Not through the Jade Circle's methods, not through drugs or prostitution, or the usual criminal cliches. He operated differently. Protection that actually protected. Gambling dens that didn't prey on addiction. Money lending with fair terms, paid back in labor if cash wasn't available. He became a myth. The Korean businessman who could break your jaw or balance your books depending on what you needed. The man who'd started with nothing and built an empire on principles that shouldn't work in his world but somehow did. I followed his rise the way you track a storm from a distance, aware, wary, grateful it wasn't heading your way, until the night it did. I was walking home from a cleaning job, 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Newark streets emptier than they should be. I'd gotten careless. 3 years of nothing makes you forget that threats don't expire, they just wait. The car pulled up beside me, black and expensive and completely out of place. The window rolled down, and I saw him. Not James. Scarface. The man from the basement who'd looked at me like I was furniture. He was older now, grayer, but that white scar still caught the streetlight like a beacon. Lorraine Baptiste. Or, should I say, Lorraine Miller. Is that the name you're using now? My fake ID, my carefully constructed identity, dissolved like sugar in rain. The Jade Circle has long memory, he said, his English better than I remembered. 3 years we wait. Now we're ready to talk. I ran. Stupid. Instinctive. Useless. The car paced me easily, and 2 men got out ahead, cutting off escape. Professional. Patient. Inevitable. Then another car appeared. A silver sedan that moved with predatory grace. It cut off the black car, and suddenly there were more men, different men, wearing suits that cost more than my monthly rent. Day emerged from the silver sedan. The big man from the basement, older now too, harder somehow. He said something in Korean, short, sharp, final. Scarface responded, animated, angry. The conversation escalated, hands moving to weapons. The street becoming a stage for violence I didn't understand. Then James stepped out of the silver sedan, and everyone froze. He'd changed. The wounded man I'd hidden had transformed into something else entirely. He wore authority like a second skin, power radiating from him in ways that had nothing to do with the gun I knew he carried. His eyes found mine across the distance, and I saw recognition, calculation, and something that might have been regret. He spoke 3 sentences in Korean. Whatever he said made Scarface go pale, made his men back toward their car, made the threat dissolve like morning fog. They left. James walked toward me, and I stood there on a Newark sidewalk, 3 years of careful invisibility, shattered in under 5 minutes. I told you, he said quietly. They don't forget. He took me to a restaurant I couldn't afford, a place where the waiters spoke in hushed tones and the wine list had more pages than my daughter's college textbook. I sat across from him in my cleaning clothes, smelling of pine sol and fear, while he ordered in fluent Italian and acted like this was normal. You should have called, he said after the waiter left. I didn't want to owe you. You already owed me. I owed you first. That's how this works. This? I waved my hand between us. What is this exactly? A conversation that's 3 years overdue. He leaned back, studying me with those same calculating eyes, though now they held something else, familiarity, maybe, or possession. You did well, Lorraine. New city, new name, low profile. Most people can't disappear like that. I had motivation. Clearly not enough. The Jade Circle found you. How? Your daughter's scholarship application. She used your real name as her mother. They've been monitoring anything connected to you for 3 years, waiting for exactly that kind of mistake. Keisha. God, Keisha. My protection had endangered her, and I hadn't even known. Is she safe? For now. I've made arrangements. He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. Guards on her campus. Discreet. She won't notice them. Rage cut through my fear. You had no right. I had every right. You saved my life. That makes your life, your daughter's life, my responsibility. Whether you accept it or not, the food arrived plates so artfully arranged, they seemed criminal to disturb. I wasn't hungry. I was furious and terrified in equal measure. I don't want your protection. Then you're a fool. He cut into his steak with surgical precision. The Jade Circle wants you dead. Not because you saw anything particularly damaging that night, but because you represent embarrassment. You helped their target escape. You made them look weak. In their world, that can't stand. So what am I supposed to do? Join your organization? Become your what exactly? My responsibility. My obligation. My... He paused, searching for the right word. Investment. Investment. The word chilled me more than threat would have. I'm not property. No. You're something more valuable. You're a debt unpaid, and I don't leave debts unpaid. He finally looked up from his meal, and the intensity in his gaze made me want to run again. You gave me something irreplaceable that night. You gave me life. Now I'm trying to give you the same. By controlling it, by protecting it. There's a difference. Is there? We ate in silence after that. Or rather, he ate while I pushed food around my plate and tried to calculate escape routes that didn't exist. I was in his world now, whether I wanted to be or not. The Jade Circle on one side, James Kim on the other, and me caught in the middle like something valuable and fragile. I've arranged an apartment for you, he said over coffee. Downtown Newark. Good building. Secure. The lease is in your real name. No more hiding behind fake IDs. You'll have a stipend. Enough to live on without working yourself to death. No, you don't have a choice. I always have a choice. He smiled then, and it was almost gentle. Then choose to let me help you. Choose to accept that saving me bound us together in ways neither of us can undo. Choose to stop fighting the inevitable. And what do you get out of this? Why do you care? The question seemed to surprise him. He thought about it, really thought, before answering. Because you're the only person in 3 years who's looked at me and seen a man worth saving. Not a weapon, not a resource, not an opportunity. Just a man bleeding in a basement who needed help. His voice softened. That's rare in my world. That's worth protecting. I wanted to argue. I wanted to throw the wine in his face and storm out and reclaim my independence. But I was so tired. Tired of running, tired of barely surviving, tired of looking over my shoulder every time I walk down a street. What happens if I say yes? Your life gets easier. Your daughter finishes college safely. You sleep without checking locks 3 times before bed. And what do I owe you? Nothing you wouldn't give anyway. Loyalty, trust. The understanding that we're connected now, that what happens to you matters to me. That's not nothing. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's less than what the Jade Circle will take if I don't intervene. The choice wasn't really a choice. It was inevitability dressed up as agency. I said yes. The apartment was everything he'd promised. 10th floor, security, views of the city I'd cleaned for 5 years without ever really seeing. Furniture I didn't choose but couldn't have afforded. A life that fit like someone else's clothes, technically correct, but fundamentally wrong. Keisha visited 2 weeks later, her eyes wide as she took in the space. Mama, how can you afford this? I'd prepared the lie. I got a new job, better pay, better hours. Doing what? Consulting for a property management company. She believed me because she wanted to, because the alternative was too complicated. She asked about my employer, and I gave her a name. James had provided real company, fake position, paperwork that would hold up to casual investigation. We had dinner in my new kitchen, and she talked about her classes, her internship applications, her plans for summer break. Normal things, good things. The life I'd wanted for her, finally within reach. She left, and I sat alone in that apartment, understanding finally what I'd agreed to. James came by that night, not announced, not unexpected. He had a key, which should have bothered me more than it did. I hated him for it. And I hated myself more for the part of me that felt safer the second I realized I wasn't alone anymore. You're settling in, am I? This doesn't feel like mine. It will. He walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. Give it time. How much time do I have? Before you tell me what you really want? He turned to face me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Not threat, something else. Something that had been building since that night in the basement, growing through 3 years of distance and mythology. I already told you. Loyalty, trust, connection. He moved closer, and I should have stepped back but didn't. You think I'm collecting a debt, but that's not what this is. This is me trying to honor one. You saved me, Lorraine. You saw me at my weakest and chose compassion over safety. That means something in my world. That means everything. So this is gratitude? This is recognition of a bond neither of us asked for, but both of us have to acknowledge. His hand reached out, stopped just short of touching my face. You want to know what I want? I want to know you're safe. I want to know your daughter finishes college without looking over her shoulder. I want to know that the woman who saved my life doesn't regret it. I already regret it. No, you don't. You regret the consequences. That's different. His hand dropped. And the consequences? Those belong to me now. I'm taking them from you. That's the payment. I laughed, bitter and exhausted. You're taking my consequences? How noble. And what do I give you in return? Your presence, your trust, your... He hesitated, and for the first time since that night in the basement, he looked uncertain. Your willingness to see me as more than the violence that surrounds me. The honesty staggered me. This wasn't manipulation. This was something rawer, more dangerous. This was a man who'd built an empire on fear, asking to be seen as human. I don't know if I can give you that. Then give me time. Give me the opportunity to prove I'm worth the risk you took. He moved toward the door, then paused. The jade circle is handled. They won't touch you or Keisha. They won't even speak your names. You're safe now, because you made me your responsibility. Because I owe you a life, and I'm spending the rest of mine making sure you never regret giving me mine. He left, and I stood in that apartment I didn't pay for, wearing clothes I didn't buy, living a life that wasn't quite mine, but wasn't quite his either. Somewhere in between. Somewhere undefined. I walked to the window, looked out at the city sprawling beneath me, and understood finally what I'd become. Not his possession, not his debtor, something else entirely. Connected, obligated, bound by the kind of debt that doesn't diminish with payment, but grows stronger with every passing day. I'd saved a man's life in a basement 3 years ago, and he'd been repaying me ever since. But the payment wasn't money or protection or apartments with views I didn't earn. The payment was him, his attention, his connection, his presence in my life like gravity, pulling me toward an orbit I couldn't escape even if I wanted to. The debt was paid, but the man didn't come back to settle accounts. He came back to claim what he decided I'd become the night I didn't let him die. But the real cost? That was just starting to come due.